Good morning. My name is Mark Levine, and I am the Deputy Director of your New York State Association of Counties. On behalf of our President, Jack Marin, and our Executive Director, Stephen Aquario, I want to thank you for joining us this morning for a webinar on using data to foster economic development. I want to take this opportunity to thank our Director, NYSAC Director of Education and Training, Jeanette Stanziano. Since the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, she has really ramped up our webinar series for our members, and we have held many webinars over the past 4 months. So thank you, Jeanette, very much. Now that the economic activities have been restarted in our communities across the state, it is more important than ever for local leaders to understand and foster a more resilient business environment. This webinar this morning will discuss how counties can use some of the data that is out there in existence to understand and build stronger local economies. We are fortunate this morning to have speakers that have agreed to lend their expertise and time to address how counties can improve their economic development in communities across the state. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the question panel in your webinar dashboard, and we will take those questions up after the speakers finish their presentations. Our first speaker this morning is William Bill Daley, the Director of Planning and Development and Special Projects Coordinator for the Wyoming County IDA. Bill was the Director of Planning and Economic Development for Chautauqua County and the Executive Director of the County of Chautauqua IDA from 2006 to 2014. Prior to public service, he was President CEO for several businesses. He is on the Board of Directors of the New York State Economic Development Council, serving as Chairman of the Membership Committee and as a member of the Finance Committee. He has served on the Finger Lakes and Western New York Regional Economic Development Council work groups. He is a long-serving member of NYSAC's Standing Committee on Economic Development, Environment, and Energy. Bill has been a friend and advisor for NYSAC for many years. Bill, we appreciate you always being there, helping us answer tough economic development questions and serving your community so well over the course of your career. Bill stepped up to provide the county context of economic development on late notice. So I can't thank you enough, Bill, for joining us this morning and lending your expertise for your colleagues from across the state. Bill.
Mark, thank you very much. This was a lot of scrambling, but it was a pleasure to be asked to do this. And I hope everybody will take this in the context. I'm going to look at the Wyoming County response, which is similar to many counties across New York State with COVID-19. And then we'll talk about how it affects economic development, moving the county forward, moving New York State forward. And I think so much of this was we're talking about data, and the SAS group, they're going to come in and talk about how they can help us avoid these things in the future. And resiliency is part of what they talk about, in crunching the data so counties can do better in reaction to these kinds of things. This being brand new, everybody scrambled. But the first thing I'll talk about is our county task force. Just to show you what we had. We had the chairman of the board of we're run by a board of supervisors. Chairman of the board, we had 3 additional supervisors. One who was Becky Ryan, who's the vice chair of the NYSAC Standing Committee on Economic Development, Environment, and Energy. We also had the head of environmental health. We had the executive director of the IDA and Wyoming County Business Center, the executive director of community action, Cornell Cooperative, we're the #1 ag county in New York State, so Cornell Co-op is very important. Director of emergency management, we had someone from community action. We're very rare. We have countywide code enforcement, and we also have pretty much all countywide zoning. So the county code enforcement officer and zoning officer, he attends all of these. And we had myself, director of planning and development for the county. So that was, and the guy who did a spectacular job, I'll even mention him, Scott Gardner, president of the Wyoming County Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. He marshaled all this over the months that we've been having these meetings. So anyhow, the task force really, its stated goals was to plan, inform, and advocate for Wyoming County's recovery. And the county is about 42,000 people, so we're a small county. A lot of the titles I just mentioned, the people that hold those titles know a lot about the county, and they've been in county employment for a long time. And what I thought, the first bullet point I put up there is long-term resiliency is what we're trying to talk about here today. But right now it's short-term survival. And it is, and I don't think anybody who's listening to this that doesn't understand that, you probably have the wrong job, the wrong elected position. We're scrambling to help our businesses survive, people to keep jobs, people be able to afford all the things in their lives at this time. The real issue to help this is that this affected not just your little startup businesses or your little mom and pop shops on your main street. This went to the biggest businesses in our counties, in our state. So everybody had to navigate all these federal rules and federal regulations in response to COVID. So what we saw ourselves out as was kind of a clearinghouse to help people do this. And then if you think about, PPP, personal protective equipment, PPE, PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, PPE, personal protective equipment, and the New York phases. The New York phases were extremely complicated, and they were done by region, and the businesses, again, of all sizes, you'd be shocked. Some of the smallest ones were acted in the most sophisticated manner, and some of the largest ones seemed to fumble around. But the bottom line is they were all supposed to have a plan for reopening, no matter where they were in the phases. And also they were to self-certify, basically saying that they observed all these rules and regs for their industry in the phase that they were opening. And every county has the ability to go see what businesses are self-certified and ones that are not. I'm not sure how that will be enforced, but we made sure that we got the word out every single time to businesses. You have to have a plan, you have to enforce the plan, and you should self-certify. So anyhow, I think the navigation of these phases, it was more than just telling people how to do these things. It became really important that we help them actually with money, with the loans, and the personal protective equipment. People were scrambling, people didn't know what to do. So then, and I put this up. It says data analytics, and seat of your pants data analytics. I hope the SAS people are laughing and not cringing at that. But COVID, it was so new, so there was so little raw data. The raw data we all got, which was alarming, was the number of positive or negative with COVID, the deaths from COVID, the number in quarantine, the numbers in isolations, people on respirators, the ages and the locations in the counties or regions where the cases were springing up. That was the data that we got. And so it was like, here here's all this horrible pandemic. Now you go figure out how to get your counties restarted after the pandemic basically sunk much of the economy. Of course, not just in New York State, but nationwide. The beauty of what we did, though, and I think this is really, really important, is you got to get the frontline staffers and you pick their brains for the expertise on how to relate with the businesses, how to relate with customers of the county at every single level, building permits, the county clerk, taxes, you name it. We had to have people who were willing to participate and do their best efforts to sort out the rules and regs and help the citizens at all levels. So really, it was a scramble, and it was a scramble to do the right thing, sort it out, but we had to process fast and act while doing it within the framework of what the state and federal government was telling us what to do. So if you could go to the next, please. This is what we did a lot, was we discussed the good, the bad, and the innovative. And we were looking and scrambling, and we would reach out to other counties, we'd reach out to the regional organizations to find out what was going on that was correct. One of the things we find is, like now, there's a $1,000 fine. If you go into a business and you're not wearing a mask and you don't have a medical reason, it's a $1,000 fine in New York State. And the business owner gets a $1,000 fine for everyone going in without a mask. I still don't think, I think a very small percentage of the population understands that. That is now the rule. Those are the rules. So those are the things that we have to get out to everybody. Anyhow, we did daily press updates from the Jerry Davis from the town of Covington is the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. He did a beautiful, he does a press release every day. It's all the COVID data, any announcements about the county, office openings, office closings, office hours. But then they have all these great links. And I put here on this slide, this was a phenomenal link. The Chamber of Commerce did this, and this kept summarizing every single day, every point of data you could, or information about how to handle it in the legal way to do it. Next. Look, I think it's so important you stay connected through your organizations. Like, look what NYSEC is doing, all the things they do on a regular basis, and all of a sudden, with all they have to do in Albany, they had this put on top, and I think they've done a marvelous job. But so have a lot of organizations. You know, the world goes on. I think there's so many issues for economic development in this state. You know, where are you going to get workers, the daycare, when are schools going to open? There's federal issues, there's New York issues, all kinds of new laws and regulations that still keep going. Census 2020 is on top of this. This is another issue. And I wrote this, and I was being a little facetious, but Zoom, 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 stay connected. You know, here we are, we're go to meeting, there's WebEx, however you can do it, stay connected, have your county officials get in touch with all the organizations they can that are offering calls, offering webinars. I think it's very important. And your organization's NYSEC, of course, but the New York State Economic Development Council, I'm on that board. Here in the Finger Lakes, the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council, the REDCs, they're all working hard to offer information and ideas. New York State, I wrote Planners Association, but it's the New York State County Planning Directors Group. Look, we just had a webinar. First, we do them every other Friday, and they were all COVID related, but the last one was all about the new siting laws for energy in New York State. And if you're a county official or a town official and you're not paying attention to the new siting laws in New York State, you're going to be in for some awful surprises. So that's what I mean. Life goes on. COVID's here, but the world's moving ahead, and you got to stay connected every way you can. One of the things that happened also was IDAs and LDCs, the New York State loosened a lot of the old rules and regs where they basically, IDAs had a lot of money. They used to give grants and give loans, and New York State took that away, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, or maybe longer, but which was crazy. And because of the pandemic, all of a sudden they've relaxed these rules, and on a temporary basis in general municipal law, IDAs can now do grants and loans for businesses. The last thing I'll talk about, well, there's other things we got to be thinking about, like broadband. Now we know how broadband really is in bad shape, especially in rural areas, since the school kids can't use it. There's other things, Economic Development, that NISAC helped us fight, but it didn't work out, prevailing wage on private projects. But the last thing I want to talk about is, when you're doing this stuff, the highest form of flattery is imitation, always imitation. There is nothing sacred. Take, borrow, I was going to say steal, but that's not the right term, but look to your friends that you work with, and then look at the counties next to you, look at the region you're in, look statewide, take the best ideas and use them to support your residents and your businesses. Thank you.
Hey, Bill, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time this morning, putting that presentation together. It provides some good context for the next part of the presentation, and it highlights what county economic development officers are facing in today's pandemic world. So thank you, Bill, for the presentation, and thank you for all the work that you do in Wyoming County. Now I would like to introduce our next speakers from SAS. SAS is a data analytics company that works with states, counties, cities, and other organizations trying to solve big data challenges to improve the work that they do and the work that we do as counties. Jennifer Robinson is the Director of Local Government Solutions, and she will be the lead speaker for SAS. Jennifer works as the Director of Local Government Solutions, where she assists counties and municipalities in using analytics to turn data into information. Her primary goal is to help local governments be able to make more knowledge-based decisions, be more efficient, and serve their citizens more effectively. She will be joined this morning by Michael Johansen, Rodney Carson, Tom Flaherty, and Spain Niemer. They are all part of the SAS team, and each of them will contribute a bit to their presentation. Jennifer, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time and expertise this morning.
Great, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you, Jeanette, for arranging for this webinar. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bill, I enjoyed your remarks, and I really appreciate the difficulty of looking at long-term resiliency while just trying to survive in the short term. As Mark mentioned, I'm the Director of Local Government Solutions at SAS. I've also been an elected municipal leader since 1999, and I presently serve as the President of the North Carolina League of Municipalities. And like many of you, I'm concerned about the health of my community and its economy, and I want to know that I'm setting economic policy based on relevant and accurate information. And so my SAS colleagues and I are here to talk to you about how data analytics can be used for better insights and informed decision making. And specifically, we're going to talk about how the use of data analytics can assist you in your economic development work. So a little bit about our company. Our company, SAS, is the largest privately held technology company in the world. And for over 40 years, SAS has helped governments, businesses, and organizations manage their data and turn their data into insights through analytics. And our company currently works with over 83,000 clients, including every federal agency and each state government. But in recent years, we have expanded our focus to include local governments. And we're looking to help cities, counties, and organizations that serve them to be able to perform the same sophisticated analytics that larger governments perform. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of local governments aren't in a position to be making data-driven decisions. And this is something that I hope to change. The first of our speakers will be Michael Johansen, and he has over a decade of public sector experience. Michael began his career as a Council of Governments consultant. He's worked as a city planner, and he's held numerous positions at the state of Iowa's Department of Economic Development. Michael, take it away. And that is not Michael, by the way.
Good morning, thank you. Well, this isn't an actual picture of him because it happened before mobile phones had cameras. But I once sat in front of an economic development agency director while he finished a call, ripped the phone off his desk and threw it across the room. After it smashed, he took a deep breath in and then he let it out, yoga style. And then, as if nothing was out of the ordinary, cool as a cucumber, he said, "Go ahead, Michael, please continue." And after all of that, I did. I picked right up where I left off. I finished my thought. He complimented the brief I left on his desk, and I left. And no one ever talked about what had just happened. But that's just the kind of guy he was. He was super explosive. And just like that, he would reset, become the most supportive, complimentary boss I ever had. All in all, I learned an awful lot from him. But you know what always pushed him to the brink of phone destruction? Inconsistencies in report numbers. Inconsistencies in the numbers were distractions. Distractions that my colleagues and I would debate for hours. My old boss was in many ways a strong leader, and he held strong opinions. He didn't like to spend time debating details. He wanted to know the lay of the land so that he could make an intelligent decision. He was a man of action, and he knew that data didn't drive his agency, decisions did. One of the biggest lessons I learned from my former phone-destroying boss is that you've got to roll with the punches. You must work with what's in front of you. And this usually means that you must continually challenge existing process to streamline where you can make better decisions faster. We've all heard it a million times. The only constant in life is change. This is the promise of technology though, right? Better accuracy, less busy work, faster delivery. But here's the pinch. As a public servant, most of us were trained to move incrementally. Many times, because your operations are so complex, you can't just decide to go in the opposite direction tomorrow morning. In my planning days, we were always updating strategic plans, comprehensive plans, and we, as a general rule, planned for emergency response as a separate group of activities than what would be found in a recovery plan, which was also separate from any planned improvements. They were all seen as linear. One came before the other, and they all had defined timeframes. But linear planning and action will not work in today's environment. There are just too many issues to deal with all at the same time. Today, situations change day to day, and to make fluid, strong decisions, leaders must have connected, timely data. It's data that must be the foundation of our recovery conversation moving forward. Did you all know that Gartner says that 56% of the time spent on strategic planning is wasted? Now, they suggest that planning efforts are often hijacked by fear of failure and a preoccupation with operational issues, which overwhelms your aspirations. That makes sense to me. I remember the anxiety of pulling multiple governments or departments into the same effort. It's a big undertaking. Collaboration is difficult. But as a former planner, I will always believe in the power of planning, but I now also advocate for an additional step to bring it all together, connected data. So I've spent some time here talking about linear process from a traditional planning perspective. Jennifer, what has your experience taught you from the perspective of an elected official about the importance of timely, accurate information? What are your thoughts about this?
Well, you know, Michael, we're clearly in unprecedented times right now. I think that we have both historically addressed issues by looking to first respond and then recover. But changing the way we operate has often come well after the situation, like we're in reflective mode at that point when we start reimagining. But having the right information at the right time is now equipping governments to begin our recovery work while we are responding and recovering. And with innovative technology, governments are dynamically changing the way that they operate. In other words, reimagining while responding and recovering. So this is another diagram from Gartner. And during this COVID experience, there's a lot of talk about how technology is changing the approach to crisis management. Here, Gartner talks about response, recovery, and renewal. Now, my colleagues and I, we talk about response, recovery, and reimagining. In terms of data analytics, when we talk about responding, we're talking about rapid data management and analysis to help governments quickly assess and understand the economic crisis landscape, build economic situational awareness, and adjust to respond and mitigate disruptions. Recovery includes assessing needed changes and ensuring that organizations have the ability to adapt and modernize for operations in this new normal, and not just in the way that we do business, but the way our businesses are operating. And then finally, in reimagination, people are looking to the future. And I think, Bill alluded to, having that future resiliency. And by looking to other sources of data and crunching that data, people can proactively plan for new industries, new operational models, new personnel needs, and build capabilities to help them be resilient in future challenges. Now, before we go too much further, I want to talk a little bit about the decision-making spectrum and what exactly is analytics, because a lot of people have a different idea about what analytics is. When some people talk about analytics, they are referring to standard reporting, ad hoc query and reporting, query drill down, and alerting. And that's really business information. So in this example, standard reporting gives you general information such as knowledge of the industries in your community. That would be standard reporting. Do you really know what your local industries are? Ad hoc query and reporting might give you workforce correlation. So do you understand the industry's workforce needs? Further query drill down could give you insight into your global position and competition. Where does your industry fit within the global landscape? And then alerts could be set up to notify you when something changes, such as an industry turnover. But analytics can be so much more robust than this business information. And so here in these upper four bubbles, you see the more sophisticated analytics. Statistical analysis can help you understand the evolution of your industries. And forecasting can help you see what the what if is, what's going to happen. For example, in this case, is your industry, is your training aligned with the true labor needs? Can you forecast, can you see forward what those needs are going to be? In predictive modeling, you are setting up those kind of what if situations. Are you prepared to upskill when industry leaves? And then finally, kind of the end all be all, optimization. And optimization is when you find what is the right move for your community. And that would be, for example, what workforce programs upskill talent while increasing disposable income. And in that case, what we're talking about is running scenarios on your computer rather than having to test them in real life. And that is way cheaper than trying to, bring up programs just to see whether they succeed or not. And so having given you that overview, I'd like to introduce you to Rodney Carson. Rodney is my colleague at SAS. He's a certified economic developer, and he has over 25 years of working with nonprofits, governments, and the private sector. And Rodney is recognized as an expert in economic development, organizational structuring, and business development. He has advised 6 governors in 3 different states on economic policy and programs, and he is regarded as a leader in using analytics to identify, forecast, and address economic and employment challenges.
Thanks, Jennifer, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I greatly appreciate you taking time out to listen to this. For me, as an economic developer, data has always been key. And Bill, you brought it up earlier. In times of disaster, we look for, what's that short-term survival needs. And it's so true. I've been through 7 hurricanes during my time as an economic developer, and that immediate focus is all that you've got on your plate, and trying to ensure that you're doing the right things is paramount to getting the economy back up and running, but doing so in a way that ensures long-term survivability and resiliency. And so what I thought I would do before we kind of move further with this is let you know how we're defining economic development. There are multiple pieces to it, but this is the way that we're kind of looking at it. We see it through the lens of what we call the velocity of money, and this is a term that economists and investors around the world use to help gauge the health and vitality of an economy. And they do this by measuring the rate at which money is circulated for the purchase of goods and services. So for those who may not be familiar with the term, it works like this. A business produces a good or service, and when it is sold, money flows into the company. That money is then used to pay workers at the business. Workers then take that money and typically spend it within their community at other businesses such as grocery stores, retail centers, restaurants, banks, etc., on other goods and services they need, and then those businesses repeat the process. Each transaction that takes place means tax revenue is being generated for the government. As such, governments love a high velocity of money in their community because it is associated with a healthy economy, while a low velocity is associated with recessions or contractions, which means less tax revenue. With time, a high velocity of money leads to the expansion of wages, which means more disposable income. To keep an economy out of recession, governments must enact and constantly tweak policies that are beneficial to both business and the workforce. But this is often a struggle as the wrong decisions impacts the velocity of money, especially in 2 areas. Workforce needs, that is, governments must ensure citizens have access to skill training for jobs currently in the market, as well as jobs for the future. And business health, governments must ensure policies do not stifle a business's viability for today or for the future. And these 2 areas are highly and tightly interconnected with one another. Now, the velocity of money only works if people are working. So you can see that the workforce of a community is its lifeblood. And for those of you who have been in the economic development world, you know that that is the central focus for economic development and recruitment. Because without a skilled workforce, a business can't exist, nor can they compete long term. Our challenge is that COVID has exposed weaknesses in both government and the business infrastructure, and this directly impacts a community's both short-term and long-term sustainability. Under the old linear model, industries evolved over time to stay competitive, and this provided government time to evolve their workforce policies. But the most successful companies were those where industry and government were closely connected to the local workforce training centers and institutions of higher education, such as your community college or universities. Unfortunately, the pandemic is causing a cataclysmic shift in the way industry operates, and this means that the once slow evolution in business and business skill set needs has become an overnight shift. Local and provincial governments face an unprecedented challenge, with unemployment rising, businesses closing, and financial markets shrinking. What you do and where you go is the big question. Economies we were all accustomed to are going to change. A local government's Achilles heel for long-term sustainable growth, again, has been exposed. And while government-backed financial assistance is being injected in the economy, this injection is temporary. At some point in time, governments have to go back to where they were at in order to move forward, and that means the government assistance will be gone. Governments have to enact effective long-term economic and workforce development strategies to ensure their economic rebound is fundamental to it and its citizens' well-being. Such policies will not only better prepare them for future catastrophic events, but the shorter they can expect the looming economic recession to last. Remember, 80% of the people in this country are employed by small businesses. Small businesses tend to live month to month. So where your policies absolutely positively impact them, the better off you are. What policies are you going to enact going forward? What industries and workforce should be prioritized? And that's a tough question to answer simply because you want to help everybody, but you also have to realize that industries evolve over time. Some are going to be leaving your community, others are going to be coming into your community. what industries coming in can leverage the skill sets that you have today, but at the same time allow you to upskill so that those people can sustain their way of life? And how do you measure the effectiveness of the decisions that are being made? Being able to measure the impact of a policy's effectiveness is central in the healthy economic recovery. And when it can be done in near real time, then a government can tweak or change policies quickly as results are learned, which further expedites the recovery process. Remember, when people aren't working, money is not flowing through the economy and communities struggle to survive. We've talked about people not working, money not flowing, but Michael, how do data analytics help in the economic development cycles?
Well, thank you, Rodney. I think the thing that I would highlight here, and Bill mentioned it in his opening as well, and you've referred to it, Jennifer talked about it, response in this economy is centered on speed. Agencies and communities must get money to businesses and into the communities as quickly as possible. Right now, there's no greater operational issue than speed. To continue on with that thought, we all know that in business, cash flow is king. And every day that cash infusions are delayed, businesses increase the likelihood of additional layoffs or closure. Businesses will also be looking for flexibility in the admissible expenditures and a loosening of programmatic compliance and red tape. So accountability and transparency will be necessary, absolutely, but businesses will be looking to provide this less frequently as they work to push through the downturn. As we turn the corner, connecting with available resources will be a top priority for businesses. Once industry has communicated their needs, the speed and accuracy with which communities and states can connect the dots will make the difference between stalling out and moving forward. So this is a big slide. Let's take a little bit of time to unpack 5 very specific stages in the economic development lifecycle that we can improve. 5 stages that must be improved if we're to have a successful recovery. Here are the 5 points that we'll cover in the next couple of minutes. Connecting data, analyzing and setting the plan, measuring progress, forecasting and modeling for the future, and clearly communicating results. Success moving forward will require enhanced cooperation between workforce development agencies, economic development agencies, businesses, and communities. With so many new programs launching so quickly, it is now more challenging than ever to keep everyone headed in the same direction. So connection, collaboration, and efficiency are the issues that must be overcome to rebuild our economy and strengthen our communities. So let's quickly run through our 5 stages. Stage 1 is connecting the data. Economic development is regional, and the downturn has not affected all regions or industries equally. Knowing where you are is the first step in determining where you need to go. Visual analytics helps by layering siloed data sets, empowering agencies to easily uncover the trends, clusters, and gaps. Connecting multiple data sets and automating the feed for updates, now this is how analytics will set the foundation to move forward. Stage 2, assessment and plan of attack. All policy professionals live by the same mantra. Having no plan is a plan for failure. Now, layering data and gaining insight greatly improves an agency's ability to target their limited resources to deliver them where they are needed most. Stage 3, what gets measured gets improved. Is the funding going where we intended? How quickly did we get it out to the public? Are we making the impact that we planned? How long did it take before we started to see improvement? These are all questions asked by economic development and workforce development boards and executives across the globe. In an advanced analytics loop, these questions are simply additional data layers to be added to the picture that we've started to paint through our connected data found in stage 1. Stage 4. Let's do more of what works and pivot away from what does not. Sometimes there's no clear choice. Advanced analytics provides the opportunity to build and run forecasting and policy simulation models to understand the potential impacts of program decisions. Analyzing past data integrated with models and forecasts keeps programs targeted towards the best outcomes. And stage 5, communication is at the heart of transparency. Communicating progress to citizens and elected officials is central to improving and expanding recovery programs. Clear communication will ensure that the long-term policies are influenced by what has been proven to work best. Next slide, please. Let's take a minute to reimagine and bring our discussion full circle. Chaos, as we've discussed, creates urgency. Urgency forces us to work differently, questioning the structures and processes that we've become used to. This urgency pushes us away from our norm, and that is what creates the space for improvement. Reimagining economic development and workforce development means creating a bigger vision. It means looking at all the agencies needed to help us get through this downturn at the same time. The benefits we will demo here in just a minute are game-changing for sure, but before we jump in, I want to challenge each of you to keep a bigger picture in the back of your mind. Economic recovery from COVID-19 will require reimagining several core agencies. In addition to economic development and workforce development, providing for citizens in this time of need will require looping in program and descriptive data from public health, human services, and revenue, pulling data from these agencies together along with others to create a unified view. That's what we will need to dynamically improve economic development in today's environment. So here we go. Let's take a real look at how data analytics can be used for economic development. Leading us through the next part of our presentation are Tom Flaherty and Spain Niemer. Tom is a customer advisory manager and has been with SAS for nearly 10 years. And Spain is a systems engineer who has been with SAS for just over 2 years. Both of these gentlemen work with our public sector customers to implement and to work with advanced analytics. So if we could please move to the next slide. Tom and Spain, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Michael. We're going to walk through a few examples of using data and analytics, and also some seat of your pants data analytics, love that phrase, to help in an economic development context. And as we go through these, it might be helpful to keep in mind Jennifer's chart, the one that used the bubbles to represent increasing levels of analytic sophistication. Our examples are going to follow a similar pattern. We'll start here with something relatively straightforward, but then we're going to layer in some additional data and more rigorous analytic techniques to make things more useful to decision makers. The first example here is a relatively straightforward dashboard showing some high-level macroeconomic indicators. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see weekly unemployment claims for the country, and the right is showing the monthly unemployment rate. And in this case, we've configured the system to pull data directly from the Federal Reserve Economic Database as numbers get updated, so we have reasonably current figures. But these are national numbers, which can be useful as a scene setter. But if you're working at a state or county level, you probably also want versions of this that give you a more granular view. And this could easily be configured to pull from whatever locally focused data systems you might have available. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here's another national view that enables you to do some comparative analysis. And in this example, we're shading different regions, in this case, states, according to their unemployment claims since COVID. We're also layering in some industry-specific data points. And when you're working with at the state or county level, you know what specific industries are particularly important for your local economy. In this case, we were layering in some housing-specific metrics. And we picked this one because if people become unemployed, they may fall behind on their mortgages, which could lead to foreclosures and then have ripple effects into the banking sector, like we saw in the last recession, and also lead to slowdowns in industries like construction or manufacturing for durable goods. And if we want to drill down into New York specifically here, we can. So next slide, please. Now here we've drilled into New York, and we're showing some specific metrics that may be more meaningful at a state or local level. In the table at the top, we're seeing things like the number of banks with headquarters in New York, along with the home ownership rate, unemployment claims since the start of the pandemic, and so forth. In the line chart at the bottom left, we were highlighting the home price index for New York. And as a reference point, we've indicated where things stood at the end of the last recession. The home price index has grown over the past decade, and if we're in a recession right now, which is almost certainly the case, this gives you a sense for how things might fall. And then that fall might have those ripple effects into banking and construction and other industries. So we're pulling in different data sets and presenting them in a dashboard and starting to provide some situational awareness, which is definitely useful. But it'd be better to have something a little more forward-looking. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. Go to the next slide, please. So in some places, construction is a big part of the local economy, and problems here might have a big impact, throughout the rest of the economy. So here's where we're starting to apply some more sophisticated analytic techniques. We're continuing that housing example, but coming at it from a slightly different angle. We're looking at data that banks report on their real estate charge-offs and using that as an indicator of overall health in this sector. At the time we produced the chart above, the data was only available through the end of 2019. So that vertical line represents the end of available data, and the blue shading to the right of that line represents a forecast of what we could expect if that trend were to continue. And the shading is showing a 95% confidence interval for those values. But we know that a major event has happened that is not yet reflected in this data. So let's use our knowledge to do some scenario analysis with what we have. So next slide, please. So this is taking now the same data and evaluating what underlying factors might influence that charge-off rate. If you look at the right pane where it says data roles, you can see a section called underlying factors. And we've asked the system to see whether the unemployment rate or the HPI percent change have an effect on our charge-offs. I realize that might be a little hard to see on the screen. The system has applied some machine learning techniques and determined the unemployment rate does have a correlation with charge-offs. And it's added the unemployment rate as a new yellow line on our graph. And visually, we can see that they do seem to follow a similar pattern. And then we can do some what-if analysis to see what real estate charge-offs might look like under different unemployment rates. So next slide, please. So now we're looking at a view where we've applied some scenario analysis. I've changed the unemployment rate to reflect what is currently happening on the ground, and which I'm confident you are all living with. And then seeing what that impact will likely have on real estate charge-offs. It makes intuitive sense that a rise in unemployment could cause delinquencies in the mortgage market. And now we have some quantitative validation of that and some sense of how bad things might get. So by applying forecasting and scenario analysis techniques, we're now getting something more like an early warning system, which may influence local economic policy. And while this is one simple example in one industry in one state, it shows how data and data analytics can help policymakers begin to predict future outcomes and then make policies that will help them achieve their goals. So let's take a look now at some of the things we might do in the intermediate term to help certain sectors, in the longer term to get people back into jobs if we cannot save them in the near term. And along the way, Spain will show us some examples of more locally specific forecasts and also highlight a creative way to use text analytics to help accelerate recovery efforts. So with that, I'll transition over to Spain to walk us through some of those use cases.
Thanks, Tom. You can go to the next slide, please. As you mentioned, monitoring government's efforts to respond to this pandemic is crucial to understanding how economies can begin to recover. So this dashboard shows the details of the Paycheck Protection Program, which are in the loans that have been submitted to small businesses within New York. The PPP is one of the most important pieces of the largest stimulus package in US history, and is crucial to understanding where funding has been distributed so that decision makers can understand where more assistance needs to be provided and if the program like this is successful. Report shows that over 300,000 loans have been approved for small businesses in New York, resulting in over $38 billion to help businesses stay open and keep their employees on the payroll. It has resulted in 3.2 million jobs, as you can see on the left side. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, small businesses employ 4.1 million people in New York. So this would indicate to me that the program has been overall quite successful in terms of supporting employees across the state. In the bottom left corner, you can see which industries have received the most loans, which is the professional, scientific, and technical services industry. Top right corner shows which lenders have given out the most loans. And then finally, the bottom right has some demographic data around the loans. Next slide, please. We can also filter down to the county level. So here we filter down just to Niagara County. And you can see that the number of loans approved for the county is just over 2,000, supporting 27,000 jobs. And you can see that there are different industries here that have requested loans in the bottom left corner. So now it's the construction industry that has received the most loans. And again, this information can be used to inform decision makers about which industries have received assistance and which may require more assistance. Next slide, please. The data from the previous slide was released by the Small Business Administration just recently, but in the midst of the pandemic from March to now, we needed some more relevant data that gave us a sense for how small businesses and employees were faring. So we turned to some non-traditional data sources to get this information. So Homebase is a free scheduling and time tracking tool used by 100,000 plus local businesses. Homebase was able to capture daily statistics on the number of businesses that were closed, that used their technology, and the reduction in hours that the employees faced. And they released this to the public to fight negative impacts felt by businesses across the country. And as Michael said, the speed at which the government can get money to businesses is crucial. So being able to take this non-traditional data and visualize it in an easily consumable way so that decision makers can understand which areas are hurting the most because of this pandemic is helpful in speeding up the recovery process. And as you can see here, the states in red are the ones that have had over 50% business closure at one point or another throughout the pandemic. And New York specifically has had 66% business closure from the companies that use Homebase. And while this dashboard shows how small businesses are faring across the whole country, the same idea can be applied to the county level. Operationalize non-traditional data sources to make decisions and have stronger return on government's investments and ultimately a quicker economic recovery. Next slide, please. The first two examples I spoke about focused around understanding the current situation. Now I want to talk about how using data analytics for making predictions can be helpful. This dashboard has some nice visuals that are easy to understand. On the back end, we're performing some predictions. Before the Small Business Administration had fully opened the Paycheck Protection Program for loan applications, I used Census Bureau's statistics of U.S. businesses data on small business and payroll to predict how much funding would be requested by each state and industry. As you can see, $563 billion is how much we expected would be requested from the program, and California, New York, Texas, and Florida, or some of the darker shaded states, would be the ones requesting the most. Next slide, please. As the Small Business Administration began to release data on who was receiving the most loans, we were able to track our predictions. So in blue here is how much we predicted would be requested across industries, and in yellow is how much has been provided to these industries. And these industries with the biggest gap between the two bars are the industries that will continue to need more assistance from the local governments. In the last few slides, we're focused on supporting business and recovery. Now we will look at how to provide some support to economic development at the person level or employee level. Next slide, please. As decision makers start to think about the economy of the future, they want to take additional considerations into account. For example, they might take into account where there is a higher concentration of population with cash public assistance. As you can see here, the darker the red, the higher the percentage of population that is on public assistance. Next. With this map, we can see the concentration of workforce. So the darker the blue, the higher the workforce present in the area, which would indicate more opportunities for business to hire people where there's more workforce. Next. Then if you're able to overlay these two maps, you can see now in purple the areas in New York that have a large number of people that can work and the areas that need more jobs and money invested in the communities. Visualizations like this can help policymakers evaluate where workforce training might have the greatest impact, and it can inform their decisions about where to invest in a vocational training center, or where they might incentivize new businesses to locate in order to provide more opportunity for people in need. Next. Well, hopefully economies will recover quickly. The sad reality is that many economies and industries will be changed forever due to bankruptcies and the economy. This will lead to many people looking for new careers. So how can government agencies help here? Using job posting data, insight can be gained into which industries are hiring and growing and which are shrinking. So here on this dashboard, we have a 3-year job growth forecast for each county and each industry within New York. The green areas are the counties that show job growth, The yellow show basically no job growth, and in red show a decline in the number of jobs over the next 3 years. This dashboard breaks down by county on the map and then industries on the bar graph. This can be used in a few ways. It can better inform an individual searching for a job about which careers he or she should look into, but more importantly, it can inform the economic development branches of government about what type of job skills are required to meet the future needs of industry. Do the local communities have enough training already, or do vocational training centers need to be set up? And do initiatives at nearby colleges and universities need to be kickstarted to meet these future demands? Next, please. This page takes it one step further for someone looking for a job. This shows the specific locations of job postings filtered by drive time on the map. There are over 3,000 job lists in the area. The jobs are categorized by industry on the right. We use text analytics here to pull out insights from job postings in the tree map in the bottom right corner to know exactly what job skills are requested for each of the industries listed in the state. This can be used to help match a job seeker with a job. It can be used to inform someone seeking a job in a certain industry which skills are required. Similarly to the previous slide, it can be used by local community colleges to give them insights into which skills they should be focusing on, or where to open vocational training centers to support the needs of the local businesses. What I really like about this dashboard is the combination of advanced analytics, using natural language processing, some locational data, and the drive time, which is a pretty cool feature. So in conclusion, we'd like to reemphasize the importance and power of using data analytics to make informed decisions. While some techniques can be quite complicated, most of the examples shown today were created using GUI interfaces with hardly any coding requirements. And one thing that I've learned personally in my own experience using analytics for making informed decisions is that even using the most basic form of analytics will yield improved outcomes. And from there, I'd like to pass it on to Jennifer to wrap us up.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Spain and Tom. I really appreciate the work that you put into preparing for this webinar. And all of you who've been listening, if you have any questions about anything that you have seen today, anything that we've discussed, this is our contact information on this screen, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And just let us know, just reach out to us. And I don't know if the NYSEC folks have any questions that they have fielded during this webinar. If so, we are happy to answer any questions.
This is Mark Levine again with the New York State Association of Counties. I want to thank Jennifer and her team from SAS for putting together this presentation. And I'd also like to thank Bill Daley from Wyoming County for adding the Wyoming County experience perspective. I have one question, and I want to remind attendees, I know we're at the 1 hour mark and we try to stay to 1 hour, but if you have any questions, you can please type it into the question panel on your webinar dashboard, and we will get to those right after this. One question I have, first of all, this is a completely new way of thinking, or a new way of thinking about economic development. And there's a lot of data out there, data that some folks may not have considered looking at when they are trying to strengthen their business community. So a very innovative way of reimagining our business community in New York. So one thing I wanted to ask the SAS team is, you know, sometimes there's a lot of data out there. You're working with data to do analytics and to propose solutions to the problems that we face. In New York, sometimes there is a push-pull competition between state economic development officers and local economic development officers. How can we put everybody or get everybody on the same page in terms of the data that's out there and how we can use that data to improve economic development in our communities?
Hey, this is Jennifer Robinson. I'll take a first stab at it and then pass it over to Rodney or Michael to see if they have anything to add. You know, we talked about reimagining, and I think the circumstances that we're in today are going to force all bodies of government to open up and rethink the way that we do business. And one of those ways that we do business is what data that we're sharing among ourselves. You know, one of the problems that local governments have is that the data that comes to them is accumulated at the state level, and it's dispersed in very latent process. It comes into us every month or every couple months, maybe every quarter. We're not going to be able to continue working that way. And this is something that our state legislators and the departments at the state level need to be aware of, that we have to change the communication of data and how it's being passed over. And that's something that is being talked about in states all over, you know, all in the South and the North, everywhere. States are starting to open up and have these conversations about data sharing. Rodney or Michael, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Jennifer, you're absolutely right. You know, in all my years of economic development, it was a struggle. I never worked directly at the state level, but I did work across, you know, 3 different states in the world of economic development, and the consistency of data from the state versus at the local level was always off. And there's got to be a better way and a better collaboration between all parties when it comes to sharing this data to ensure that it's consistent. You know, site selection consultants and others who are looking at their business and determining a place to go that's going to fit based on work set skills, when they're getting conflicting data from the state versus at the local level, it really begins to make them question what's really true. And so where we can connect data together at the state and local level and be able to view it together, you're going to have a much more powerful story. And there's going to be a lot less of the push-pull mentality that exists across the U.S. In this profession.
Mark, it's Andrew Ball from SES. If I could also just chime in from my experience, my prior life working in the governor's office in New York. You know, I think to answer your question as to the state and the local, I think the New York Regional Economic Development Councils, I think that, you know, Bill had mentioned earlier, would be great vehicles for this. And I think also, you know, these types of data sharing agreements will really help inform your, you know, DRI applications and RADC funding and all of that. So I think those are great vehicles for this type of data sharing.
Great, thank you very much. I think, yeah, we need to keep this conversation going, and with folks like Bill Daley and folks like Andrew, who has experience at the state level, for how we can all get on the same page and use this innovative data to help rebuild and reimagine our economic development in New York. One last question for me, and that is, if we go back to the Reimagine slide with the colored in counties in New York, the forecasting of future growth or shrinkage of jobs in New York. Some of those counties, a fair number, too many counties are red, right? Indicating that the future does not look that bright in terms of their economic activity. How can we, what do you recommend for counties who are looking at the projections of losing jobs? How can we turn those red counties into yellow or green?
Hi, yeah, this is Spain. I'll take a first pass at this one. Yeah, so here I would probably just look at the underlying algorithm and see where we're pulling the data from, which is the job listings and job postings, and see kind of why that's given that outcome. Is it certain industries that don't seem to be growing? And then if so, then you can start looking at those industries, and maybe these local governments can start investing more money here. Maybe they take incentives from one county and place it in another county. But yeah, I would just probably start by looking at the algorithm as a whole, and then why, and then the inputs going into it, and then go from there and dig a little deeper.
Yeah, Mark, this is Rodney. I want to add on to that. Spain is absolutely correct. You have to look at where the data source is coming from. But it's also an eye opener for communities because oftentimes they don't want to acknowledge with seat of the pants data, which we often use, and it's a good source and a good driver. But sometimes we're so close to what's going on in our own communities, we can't acknowledge what's transpiring. And data doesn't lie. And so here you've got a great picture of, you know, industry sectors that are slowing down, skill sets that are openly available. And as an economic developer, it's a great opportunity to reimagine how we can take those people with skills who are unemployed and with minimal effort, upskill them into an industry that keeps them employed and continues to move the local economy forward. So often as an economic developer, our private sector boards and others come in and say, we want to have a biotech company here in the community. But they don't realize that to reach a biotech company, there's got to be an evolution if you don't have the right infrastructure. And so what do you have today that you can build on to move you to that over a long term? And that particular slide is a great starting point. It's a great foundational builder to say we've got XYZ type companies. They have these particular type skill sets. And with minimal effort, we can actually move them to jobs or to employment that is much more sustainable and much more competitive in the global economy. So that's one way to look at it as well.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much for those very thoughtful answers and the very thoughtful presentations provided this morning. I want to again thank all of our presenters. Thank Jeanette Stanziano, the NYSEC Director of Training and Education, and to thank the whole team here. And thank you for joining us from the counties. Please be well, stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you on our next webinar. Take care.